question is, I guess, Chris, and you've been in the role of advisor. If a leader at that stage said, "I'll just call him," would you say, look, maybe just get someone from the office to get the details? Is that if you could do it in hindsight?
This is my point about this issue. We'll see. Angus Taylor will resign in a week, and I'm going to end up with egg on my face. But I honestly can't recall a so-called political scandal that's been as thin as this one. So we're talking about what's happened to the metadata. Well, that's not really the issue. The issue is, did someone deliberately change some numbers or not? And if so, who, for what reason? And now, what did they talk about? Well, the Prime Minister said in the Parliament he was going to ring the police commissioner. He then rang the police commissioner, and both of them have talked publicly about what was said. You couldn't possibly expect a Prime Minister to stand aside a minister because of a police investigation without actually checking the status of that police investigation. So I think we've got all these side debates here and people running around saying, should Angus Taylor resign? Yet no one's going to the substance of the issue. What is the substance? What are they actually alleging that Angus Taylor did? And if the suggestion is that he or someone in his office deliberately misquoted the Sydney City Council's own numbers back to it in a letter to try and embarrass them, then it is perhaps the most stupid political move in the history of a pretty stupid game.
It might well be, we'll see. As I said all along, it doesn't seem believable that you could take this political risk for the achievement of, I don't know what page it was on the Daily Tally that day, but it was a bit of you want to, because let's remember where this comes from. Yeah. Clover Moore was calling a climate emergency and saying the federal government should do so. Angus Taylor got the response from the department, which was, here's what we're doing, and we've signed up to Paris and so on. He wanted to put a bit of mayonnaise on it, basically.
He added a political barb at the end, and I remember commenting it on the day and saying, well said, I didn't use the numbers because they looked a little implausibly high to me. You wonder why they didn't think the same themselves. But
there's no way to get away with that. No one's going to let you say that's a rounding error.
No, exactly, but and no one's going to think it's not going to be called out because you're quoting those numbers back to the organisation that has the numbers. So it seems absurd to me, and the point he was making was really about climate hypocrisy rather than cost. He was saying, and it is the case, that Clover Moore and her councillors have flown overseas and interstate to all sorts of climate events while they've been declaring a climate emergency.
Just for an update on what's happening in the House there, we had Mark Butler try to speak and then a 1-minute division to silence him, and then Julie Collins got up to speak and another 1-minute division to silence her as well. So that's what we're going to see the conclusion of here. This seems like a strategy from Labor to really dominate the morning.
Well, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
It's so the motion here is to force the Prime Minister to come in and
make a statement to the House, yes, because they did ask him to come last night. The Prime Minister had a family event in Sydney that he said he pre-warned Labor about a number of days beforehand. And so they've said it's a bit of a dirty tactic for then Labor to demand he front the House when they knew he was in Sydney. They said he went there at his own cost. It was a completely private issue, and so they didn't think that was an appropriate...
Is there someone in the Prime Minister's office feeling sheepish today after this quote? The quote was accurate. It was not the person
attribution,
saying
yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's a bit messy too, but again, it's messy and they clean it up. I suppose the interesting dynamic I've noticed just from being around the building this morning, of course, is the government's on the back foot about this. A lot of people in the media are getting very excited about this, and it's put a spring in Labor's step. I mean, Labor have not had a good year, particularly since the election, and just the Labor front benches and others I've seen around here, it's a good feeling for them. They've got the government on the ropes on a sort of political insider issue of the day. They've got other issues like robo-debt where the government's looking to get on top of things. So it changes the dynamic a bit. And as you know, in this last sitting fortnight of the year, everyone likes to get a little bit toey.
This is the most organised we've seen Labor since the election. They really have kind of come together in a way that's probably going to have the government on their toes from now on. We can see here no more speakers up. This is the division on the substantive motion put forward by Anthony Albanese, and this is them crossing the floor. What do you make of this particular strategy by Labor this morning, Tom, coming in 9:30 straight out of the gate, moving on this?
Yeah, I think for them it makes sense. The key in these sorts of things is any sort of move on, even if it's incremental. So the minute that post-question time yesterday, the quote was misattributed, and in a significant sense, it was Ben Fordham instead of the cop saying it. Well, there you go. You can hang that on the next one.
I know Ben Fordham.
I think from here,
an authority.
Look, they'll be pleased they've got a sitting week next week, so they might keep trying to pursue this. But for now, I think given what Nick Fuller has said, we're going to see this. The next step here is whether or not there's any progress in the police investigation. If there are charges, he has to stand aside. That's the ministerial code. If there are not, he won't, and the government will say there are no charges. Now, interestingly, Mark Butler yesterday on Sky said that they would keep pursuing this even if there are not charges. So it's kind of like we're going to win either way scenario. But if you've got the police saying no charges, I think it's going to get harder to pursue.
Absolutely. We do have some vision that's just come into the newsroom. It's our first shots of Prime Minister Scott Morrison since he's come back to Canberra. We can play these for you now. That's him going down the corridor there with Melissa Price and Peter Dutton there we can see. And I'm told he drove himself back this morning.
Jumped in the car?
Yeah. Not too good for the highway down to Canberra. What do you reckon? Is he looking pretty confident there, Chris?
Yeah, do you reckon he would have stopped at Macca's at Maryland or where's Sutton Forest? Yeah, on the way. That's my normal stop driving down.
Can't miss
Look, you know, he's got to sort this out. But it's again, the substance here is just lacking. Why Angus Taylor's office hasn't just come out and tried to explain where the number came from? But I presume someone's tried to copy it off a website. There's a similarity in the numbers, as you say. You're shifting decimal points, and someone's stuffed this up because, as I say, the alternative that someone would try and fool the Sydney City Council by escalating its own numbers is an absurdity.
Well, the other option is it was a setup, that they were deliberately given completely wrong figures to embarrass them. And I'm sure that's something they'll be looking into as well.
As I said, there's that curious element to it. I hope we find out definitively one day.
One of the great mysteries.
There must be bigger issues. There must be bigger issues confronting the country than how some numbers in a letter to Clover Moore misquoted her own numbers back to her. You know, honestly, please, someone tell me what the scandal is. Tell me what Angus Taylor is allegedly trying to do here.
Well, but that's the thing. If there's a doctored document, you'd be pretty worried that a cabinet minister, and again, it's not him. There's this sort of one step removed with a staff member. But presumably he has asked questions to find out and ascertain exactly what's happened since this happened, right? So he's armed with the full knowledge. So
also, if it is true,
that's what it hangs on. If there's a doctored document versus a mistake. The problem, I suppose, is now is what they've told us what's happened, that it was obtained in some way from a website.
Yeah, copied from the website.
So that didn't happen because they've actually presented they haven't said, oh, it could have been some numbers. They've specifically said it wasn't a case of stuffed up numbers. That they were there on the website. So that has to be accurate.
Sorry, Tom, we're taking back live now to the House where it seems the division has been voted on. We can see the pictures here, just waiting for the numbers on what the actual votes were, but the division has failed as expected. They don't have the numbers in the House.
There's Angus Taylor in the middle of it all.
Let's just take a listen.
Given he's here to actually approach the dispatch box, correct the record, and to say sorry. Which is appropriate, which is what has been done in the past.